Welcome back to the Mag Do It YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and ring that notification bell. We're going to up your producer game 1000%. We're about to go off on this motherfucker. That Vital is about to go crazy. Mag Do It's about to show us.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Snake.
You're welcome.
That was so hype.
I had him with the ad libs. I had the ad libs on that one.
For real. Actually, well, maybe we can make this for real. You know, like in his honor, we will make sounds today. But yeah, so today I just wanted to give back to you wonderful people and show you all what I do and how my mind works when I am making basses, because it seems like you guys really dig them, and I want to show you some of the sauce that helps me get to that kind of clean and powerful final product. Because obviously it's all a product, sadly. But no, yeah. So as I had previously said before I realized we weren't really recording properly because you guys couldn't see, I'm gonna go over some of the main things that I do inside of Vital, but you can do this inside of any synthesizer. And I'm hoping that the things that I am going to explain to you can help you in every aspect of your synthesis, not just in Vital. So hopefully I'll talk about this in a way where you can apply the ideas to whatever synthesizer you really like to use. But yeah, let's jump right into this. Like, so how do I make my basses? The first thing that I always do is I have a fundamental wave, and it's usually a sine wave. So you can obviously, in a lot of different synths, you can get to a sine wave in different ways, but in Vital there is a factory preset called Basic Shapes, and inside of Basic Shapes you have the sine wave, and most of the time I am using a sine wave, but every once in a while I will use the squared sine wave, which is just a little bit up on the frame here, or I will also sometimes draw in harmonics by clicking on this little pencil tool here, and it will let you draw in the harmonics inside of this little what is this? I guess it's like the wavetable editor. And I will sometimes do it like this. But yeah, most of the time I'm just using a sine wave though. And I think that that's just because I really appreciate how clean it feels on a sub. But it doesn't sound very different to other sounds. So the thing that I always keep in mind is, like, as long as my mid bass that I'm putting on top of this sounds super interesting and wacky, then it doesn't really matter that it's just a sine wave. But if you are planning to be a little bit more minimal with your mid bass, then I would suggest going for more of a squared sine wave or something that has a little bit more harmonics, just because it will definitely help you stand out from other people that are making low frequency music. But yeah, so that's always the first thing that I do. So let me just draw in that first harmonic again. Make sure we got that nice and sturdy. The next thing that I always make sure of is that my phase randomization, which is up here in this little phase section, is set to 0%. So you can see here when I click on it, it's kind of hard to see, but it says phase randomization. I shouldn't say never. I'm sure there's probably like one time where this was good, but I would say most of the time you really don't want any phase randomization in your low frequency stuff. So whether it's your sub basses or maybe your kick drums, things like that, like if you're synthesizing these instruments, you don't want phase randomization, because what happens is on an oscilloscope, you'll see that every time you hit this sine wave, if I have phase randomization on, in fact, you can see it in the oscilloscope up here inside of Vital. You can see how it keeps shifting the shape of the sine wave. Whereas if I have phase randomization turned off, you can see it's just a sturdy, it's always the same shape. And that's what we want. We want our sub frequency information to be very controlled, very like pristine, and yeah, that helps us create a more sturdy feeling sound. Because even when I'm just hitting it with the 100% phase randomization, you can feel like every once in a while the initial attack just doesn't feel as as like impactful. And it makes sense because like I'll bring up a paint here so you can see. You're essentially looking at an XY grid here, and if you have like the this is like your sine wave. Well, if your sine wave is starting like here instead of there, then you're starting at like a higher point. Or if it's starting down here, right, then you're starting at like a lower point. So the idea is you want it to always start at this zero crossing. So that way you always have like a consistent feeling sub-frequency bass. The other reason why this is really helpful is it will reduce clicks. It won't get rid of clicks, but it will help reduce clicks, which are not very fun. Digital clicking and digital distortion is never really like an exciting thing to feel as a listener. At least that's my own opinion. Maybe you guys will start making your own like digital distortion music, but please don't. But anyway, so yeah, I know it's a little bit long-winded, but it's really important. That is the foundation of everything that goes into my basses. Like if you do not have a clean, pristine, dedicated sine wave, then I feel like you're missing out on the power that you can feel when it comes to basses. So after a sine wave is established or something like that, in fact, maybe we'll get a little spicy today and we'll use this squared sine wave, give us some extra harmonics there. The next thing you're going to want to do is add on some kind of overtones. Now, we have a couple with the square wave. These things down here are overtones. So if we look at you can see this here. You've got like the foundation, the original frequency, and then we have these overtones for the frequency, or for the sine wave. And this is an okay amount. Like you could probably get away with this as like a sub, but we want to make mid basses. We want to make like squonky, crazy, kooky sounds. So that involves a lot more frequencies. And most of the time I will use a wavetable to establish that. Now there's like tons of different wavetables you can use. Obviously inside of Vital, there's a lot that you can just scroll through in like the factory. There's I think all of these come with Vital, like the Glurklunk one here and the Tom Lee Teat and the Data Broth ones. All of these come with Vital. But the cool thing is you can also always import your own wavetables. So keep that in mind when you are, wanting to make cooler sounds. Not that these ones aren't fire, because I'm going to actually use a bunch of factory wavetables today, but I just wanted to show you that you can add your own, and that's like a big part of my own production process. And maybe in some later workshop, I'll show you how to make your own wavetables, and we can go into that because I do that a lot when it comes to my own sounds. But you can always make really cool sounds with the wavetables that you're given. So in this case scenario, we're gonna drink the juice here. We're gonna go to factory and use the drink the juice wavetable. I really like this wavetable a lot. It's got like a very neuro vocally feeling to it, and you can see here, even just cycling through the frames, it sounds really cool. The other big thing that I want to just make sure you guys understand as well is, once again, zero phase randomization. Anything that dips into the low mid region, like the 200 hertz range, I never risk it by allowing phase randomization. I always make sure that there's just zero, because then you know that you're guaranteed that it's always going to be sturdy. There won't be phase canceling. There won't be like moments where you're losing some of the quality of your low end. So yeah, I always make sure 0%.
I hate to interrupt, but for those of us following along at home, where do we find the Drink the Juice wavetable?
Oh,
where is that at?
So it is in Factory and then Drink the Juice.
Okay.
And I think it's in
All right, thank you.
Complex. Yeah, Factory, Complex, Drink the Juice. Yep. So
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. My bad. I should have mentioned that. So yeah, Drink the Juice. It's a really, really fun wavetable. And so as you can see here, you can get some really cool sounds if you even just moving this around. So almost immediately, like, I'm going to click and drag this macro onto this, so that way in the future, if I want to automate this, I can. I can now do that, and I'll usually rename these just so that way I can understand what it is. So I'll just name it WTPOS, which is wavetable position. so that way I can automate that in the future. But for now, we're going to actually automatically do that, and this kind of goes into like the next sort of section of Vital, because we've mainly been chilling out in the oscillator section here. We're going to start going to the modulator sections over here. So we've got LFOs, we've got envelopes, and then down here we have these two called random. And I think you can actually have more than one and two. As soon as you add like a second one, it will just keep adding new ones. But we just want to worry about random one for now. And the idea here is we can use this random modulator to randomly modulate this LFO for us, so we don't have to do the whole like cool wavetable moving thing. And I do this a lot on my basses because it saves me tons of time instead of having to like, you know, cycle through the wavetable or use like another hand on like a micro, or not a microcontroller, but you know what I mean, on a MIDI controller. I can just have this automatically happening. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag the random onto the wavetable, and we're going to set the mode to sample and hold, and the tempo we're going to drag all the way down till it says freeze. And the reason why you do this is this kind of turns it into a randomizer that only randomizes at the beginning of each note. So every time you hit a note, it will randomize, but while you're holding down the note, it will keep that same sample and hold and freeze. So like the mode is sample and hold, and then the tempo is freeze. So the idea here is by doing this, it will only randomize when you play a note. And this is so good because it allows you to have some stability between each note, which I find to be helpful for mud-pieing, because whenever I'm like using a sample that I've recorded, I don't want it to be like too crazy. I want to have like some context to it to help me use it more easily in a project. So you can see now when I play each note, so you can see how I play each note now. It's only changing, and all I'm doing there is I'm just hitting the F note on my keyboard. And to enable that, by the way, in case you didn't know, up here you can click this little piano, and that will let you play notes in Ableton. In other DAWs like FL Studio, there's ways to do that as well. I'm not sure about like every DAW. Bitwig's very similar. You can press the caps lock if you're in Bitwig, and that will let you play notes. I'm trying to remember how to do it in FL. I think there's a little button that you press as well up in the top middle, like transport
It's Control T.
Okay, thank you.
Is how you enable the keyboard to piano
Yes.
MIDI. Yep.
Yeah, and that's helpful if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, which I do not think you need in order to make cool sounds. Pretty sure Skrillex showed us that one forever ago. But yeah, all you need is a keyboard and a mouse, and that's usually enough to get the job done. So yeah, by enabling that, it allows you to play what it is that you're working on. And what's cool about this is we can also set the amount of randomness that's happening. So if we take this second macro here and we click and drag it onto the circle, there's this little circle that's basically showing us the modulation amount onto the wavetable. So if we click and drag it onto this circle here, it's going to basically act as a attenuator for how much the randomization is happening. So I can rename this to random. And basically what this does now is if it's down all the way, it's basically turned this off. But if I turn it up, it allows for more randomness to happen. And what I find useful about this is sometimes you don't want like full randomness, but sometimes you do. And I find having control over that is nice, because then you can combine these two things together, where I can like set the wavetable where I like it. Like maybe I really like that one, that part of the wavetable. And then I can kind of like up the randomness to taste. And it will kind of gravitate ever so slightly towards where we left that wavetable position. And this is kind of nice for when you're exploring lots of different wavetables, just because you can kind of select the areas that you like in the wavetable and be in that sort of vicinity, but also get some variation, because the whole point of the randomness is to add variation to each note hit, which I think is, what makes each bass more interesting. Any questions so far, by the way? I'm kind of blowing through stuff, but I want to make sure you guys are all at this same stage. Is anyone stuck at any of the parts that I've discussed so far?
So the big differences between what you've seen and what you know about doing as far as the drink the juice basic shapes.
Yeah, and I mean, the big thing about the drink the juice wavetable that I do want to make super clear is you can make this anything, which I think is the most fun part about this way of designing sounds. Because we have our sub kind of established and we're using this as like a mid bass generator, which we are going to high pass, but I don't want to jump the gun yet. This is essentially allowing you to put in whatever you want. Like, you could go and download your own wavetables, make your own wavetables, and you could put in anything you want, and you can just start exploring the different kind of timbral things that exist in the world, which I find to be a lot more exciting from a explorative perspective, rather than building all of these complex tables yourself, which I can also show you how to do that as well in a future workshop. But yeah, the idea here is it allows you to access a lot of different timbres very quickly and easily, and in a somewhat fun way, because we still have this random aspect to it, and it's not like we have a lot of work invested.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so any wavetable works here, but let me go back to the drink the juice here. All right. So
is this a thing right now? Is this why everybody's muted? Are we doing something?
Yes. Yeah. What's up, Drew? Yeah, I'm doing a workshop on vital basses.
All right, bet.
And I'm going from the ground up. All right, like, we're not missing anything. We're gonna make some seriously.
You don't even start. You didn't even start with the underground.
What?
How fucking dare you?
No.
You should leave out the most important part.
No.
No, he did a lot of baseline stuff.
Yeah, I want to make sure that
good tutorial so far.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure nothing is missed.
He's building the foundation. He's literally building the foundation right now.
Yeah.
You can't have foundation without the underground. Much love to the underground.
Yeah. But anyway, so once you have these two oscillators set up and we have kind of our randomness set up on the wavetable, the next thing is kind of deciding how we want these two oscillators to be routed inside of Vital. So the first oscillator, as we have discussed, is our sub. So we have two options. We can either have the sub go direct out, which I will sometimes do, but I usually do this intentionally, meaning I don't have this automatically set, but there are times where I will want to set this depending on if I want to, for example, have like a dedicated sub outside of this, or if I want to not have a dedicated sub outside of this, meaning if I don't have a dedicated sub, I will set this to direct out. But if I do have a dedicated sub, I'll actually keep this built into the synth, because it does allow you to do some things with distortion that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So in this example, I am going to keep everything inside the synth because we are not going to have a dedicated sub. But just for future reference for people who are used to using dedicated subs, or not using dedicated subs rather, you can always go direct out. But because everyone should use a dedicated sub, I think it's more fun to make the sound as crispy and as distorted and as intricate as you possibly can inside the synth. And in theory, even if you don't have a dedicated sub, we're building this in such a way where you can get away with this just still going through all of the effects, because we are setting it up to be really pristine and clean, from the phase randomization perspective, and making sure that we have a sine wave as our foundational element. So I know it's kind of confusing, but long story short, it's helpful to know that you can direct out your sub, because you sometimes want to do that, but it is situational. The other thing is we have this other oscillator, and we're actually going to route this to filter 1 as well. And the reason why we want to do this, filter 2, because we have our sub going to filter 1. the reason why we want to do this is we want to high pass this. So even though Drink the Juice probably doesn't have a ton of low frequency content, you can see that there is some, especially past like 120 hertz. There's for sure some low frequency content. And even though it's barely audible, like I'm not really feeling the sub from it, it's enough to potentially weaken our dedicated sub. So what we're going to do here is we're going to turn on filter 2, and we're going to change this to a high pass by clicking and dragging this top section here. And in case your filter isn't on whatever setting we need here, you can select the different filter types, and we're just going to be using analog 12 dB or 24 dB, depending on how aggressive the low end is. And in fact, you know what, to be on the safe side, we'll do 24 dB because that's a very aggressive high pass, which is what I think is the best for these sorts of situations. And then, of course, we are going to reduce the resonance because resonance is going to add timbral change, and we don't really want that. We want it to stay clean. We just want to get rid of the low frequencies. So, and we can even turn this oscillator off, and we can watch, at least if you have mini meters or another spectrum analysis tool, we can watch and see that it's getting rid of the low frequencies there. And even if you can't watch it, you can always just kind of either earball it or eyeball it, depending on how you're feeling. And just know that as long as you're cutting out a good amount of frequencies and it still sounds decent, then you're probably fine. So yeah, I think that's fine. And now when we add the sub back, we have this low end, and there's zero chance of anything coming from this wavetable affecting it in a weakening way. Like, it's not going to weaken it at all. So now that we have all of this set up, does anyone have any questions with that whole process? The routing, that's how you route. You route by clicking on these things here beneath the levels. Does anyone have any confusion with that? And the direct out sub optional thing is a thing that exists as well. Everybody's good there? All
I
right.
have a question, but it might not be really that relevant.
What's your question?
Where you said you can enable the filter on the oscillator over there underneath the pitch on the oscillator where it says filter 2, isn't that the same? You could do it right there where your mouse is in
Absolutely.
the filter?
You could do it here. Yeah, you're not wrong.
All right. Sweet.
Yep. So yeah, a good way to, yeah, thank you. That's actually super helpful. Yeah, you can either turn them on here or up here. I just, for some reason, always go to this drop down menu, but yeah.
You're fine. I just didn't want to overthink it and think that there's something different with that.
That's greatly appreciated. No, there's a lot of that inside of Vital. So like a good example of that as well is with these, I guess they're like modulation amounts on the modulators or even the macros. Even though there's one here for the wavetable position, there's also going to be one over here for the wavetable position. And you can see when you hover over it what it corresponds to. So this one is macro 1, and this one is macro 1 originally before we renamed it. So yeah, those are like the same thing. And you can see how I move it here. It changes it on both.
2 times. Yeah, okay, awesome. There's 2 times the button that changes the exact same thing. Like the filter oscillator combo.
Yes. Yeah. So this essentially is the same thing. It's just in 2 separate spots. So similarly to the selection for routing. Cool. All right. So let's go on to the next step, and that is we're going to look at the matrix for a little bit. Because the matrix is a really interesting place, but we will only approach it from a very simplistic perspective for today. There's only one thing we're going to do in here, but just know that this is a nice place to go if you want to adjust the amounts of different modulations of things. You can change your LFOs or macros to be bipolar or non-bipolar, which means instead of only being a positive amount, it can also go negative. So it's just helpful to know that that is something that exists here. You can also enable or disable things here by clicking on the number to bypass it. So if you have something that you want to see is good or bad, or maybe you want to just keep it inside of your preset but not delete it, you can always just bypass it in here. But yeah, let's go ahead and do what we came here to do. And that is we're going to now look at this LFO1, and we're going to use this LFO as a envelope. I know it sounds kind of counterproductive as we have envelopes up here, but I actually really like the LFO GUI and the way that it works in comparison to the envelope. There really is not a huge difference, but the biggest thing that I like about it is in the LFOs, you can literally click and draw and create whatever amount of points that you want, versus inside of the envelope section, you really can't do that. There's only attack, sustain, decay, release, hold, and what else? And the delay, I guess, but that doesn't really count. But anyway, it's a lot more controlled and less dynamic. You can't do as much stuff with it. So inside of LFO1, as you saw, I dragged this top part over here because we're going to be creating an envelope. So we're creating a decaying envelope. So we're going to create a point by double clicking here, and we're just going to create a little triangle that looks like this. And yeah, it's a simple envelope, but you can see how like we could make the same exact shape as we can see up here, right? But we also have the ability to do more crazy things if we want. And that's why I really like using LFOs instead of envelopes for this kind of stuff. But anyway, so once we have created that triangular shape, we're going to change the mode to envelope. And the reason why you want to do this is because we're using it as an envelope. We don't want it to keep cycling through the automation which we're about to apply. So after you've created the shape of this triangle, we're going to use it as a pitch bend shape. So we're going to go up here into the matrix, and we're going to click on this little kind of grayed out box here. On your Vital, I hope it's a little bit easier to see. I kind of have this spicy skin, so you may have to bear with me in that regard. But yeah, you can click here, and we're going to click LFO1 as our modulation source because that's the LFO that we used here. If you used a different LFO, then you would select that one, but I used LFO1. And then we're going to go to global on the destination here. We're going to go to global and voice transpose. And then if you click down in this empty space, it will like let you close these windows. And then we're going to right click on this bar. You could just drag this if you wanted to, but I have found an easier way is to right click, enter value. And because we want to do 12 semitones, which is a full octave, we're just going to type in 12 and then click enter. And now it will perfectly pitch down an octave very quickly when we play our instrument. And it's only happening when we are hitting notes because it's set to envelope. If you have it set to trigger, you can see when you hold down a note, it'll keep triggering it, and we don't want that. We want it set to envelope. So yeah, that's why we changed the mode there. Another thing you can do if you want to be a little bit more precise with this, you can actually drag this back out and make it longer and just change the speed of the envelope tempo. So, you know, we could set this to maybe a quarter note. And we can kind of get a little bit more precise if we wanted to. And we can even adjust the shape of the envelope here with this little middle point to... So yeah, and some good numbers here for the pitch bend amount. Obviously we did an octave, but another good one is like 5 semitones is nice. If you just want that little bit of like a hint of a kick feeling, you can do that. And of course you can even go a little bit crazier and go up an octave and make it like really, really punch. So just know that you can always adjust the amount. I always recommend adjusting it to a specific number though. You want it to still be in the key that you're playing, or at least relative to the key that you're playing when you hit that note. So that way when you do put it on a certain note, it just feels right. Like you don't want it to be, I don't know, some arbitrary number, because then you might, I mean, it still can sound cool. And I should say, here's what I should say. If you're going to be sound designing to record samples for later use, which is most of the time what I'm doing with this, then you want to be conscious of the fact that you're going to want to know what note is being played, and that when you drag in that sample and you've labeled it with that note, that you can rely on that. Otherwise, you're just gonna like have to guess what note each sample is hitting, and that can be very difficult from an arrangement perspective. So I'm just gonna set this back to 12. We got this really cool sound. So yeah, and then obviously so you can see already like we're getting to that kind of foundational squonk energy as far as the timbral aspects are concerned. The next thing that I'll usually do is I'll head over to the FX section. I'm just making sure that everyone get that little matrix detour. Any questions on the matrix detour that we just took? No questions. Fantastic.
I have one question.
What's up?
What's another example of something you could do that's really cool in the Matrix?
Okay, so something that I will do, I mean, I don't know if it's really cool. It's one of those things where it's helpful to be
That's
able
really
to,
cool.
well, like it's helpful to be able to control what it is that you want from one spot. And honestly, the bypass is like the most useful thing I could say, other than what we just did, where you can very easily attenuate things that aren't very easy to find. So like when we went to our destination here, all the global parameters here, being able to just
Yes.
very easily get to those is really nice. But yeah, the biggest thing in my opinion is the bypass, because let's say we want to keep this whole thing that we just did here, but maybe we want to disable it for now, right? Like maybe we don't want this to be doing the whole pitch bend kick thing, but we don't want to delete it, so we could just bypass it.
Can you automate that?
That's a good question. I mean, let's see if you can. Yes, you can. There you go.
That's insane, actually. That's really cool.
Yeah, so you can automate that as well, which is handy. So anyway, yeah, that's probably the coolest part about the Matrix, in my opinion. And the fact that it's very easy to make the LFO bipolar from here as well, which is sometimes really helpful. In this case, we're not going to be doing anything with bipolar LFOs, but yeah, sometimes you want that to happen when things are going up and down. In fact, in this case scenario, you could make an argument that having the random in bipolar mode is better, but my issue is that there's really no way to win with the random from the standpoint of, if you have this wavetable up all the way, it doesn't matter that the random's all the way up, because it's only going to be going up because it's not in bipolar mode. But
what if I don't like the word bipolar? What the fuck does bipolar do in the LFO? Because I don't like that shit. I don't like it.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so I will show you. So with this random, as you see here, because I have the wavetable position all the way up and the random all the way up, it should be randomly jumping around on this, right? Well, it's not, because it's only going into positive values. So if we wanted it to always be random, then we would have to enable this random bipolar mode here, this little double arrow thing. And now it's randomly jumping around again. The catch with this is, well, I have messed this up slightly, but that's because I messed around with this knob here. But the idea here is, when I guess there's no bad thing about it. It's just, okay, here's the thing. It really will only be truly random if you have the wavetable position in the center. But as soon as you start bringing it past the center in either direction with the bipolar mode enabled, it's going to sometimes favor being on this last portion of this wavetable on either direction. So like it will sometimes go over this, like, so like if I have this wavetable position here, it will sometimes basically think that there's like a position down here that it wants to play. Not on this oscillator, but just like imagine this one bar keeps going down, but it can't, so it'll just end up playing the very end of the wavetable, which I think is not helpful, but it's just, I guess it's something you can do, right? Like, and you can just have it bipolar and then just adjust the randomness to taste. Maybe that's like a better way to guarantee that it's random all the time. But yeah.
I don't think you can put stuff on macros, but like one desired effect sometimes with phase plant, when you have bipolar, is you can put something all the way down, and then you have like a 50% chance of an effect coming in if it hits past that 0 threshold. And or it could just go all the way down. I like if you had stuff. I don't think you can modulate macros though.
You can, but I'm wondering if you can do it in the way that you're describing, because you're setting up like
I
a
do that in
threshold,
FaceTime
right?
all the time, where it's just like a chance of something coming in, like because it's bipolar, but all the way at 0, so half the time it's at negative, not doing anything.
I see what you're saying. Let me see.
And then randomly it can just like pop in, pop out, kind of thing. That could be like some kind of desired effect with that, but
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And the short answer is you
Or if
can't
your
modulate this. But I think you
influence
can.
isn't at 100%.
Okay, but you
Somewhere
can
you could have
automate
it
it.
go up and down, but
Well, word. Yeah, you can automate it though. So maybe that's like something that you could have like a random automation in Ableton or in whatever DAW you're using. I guess in FL it would be like, what's the envelope follower, or not envelope follower, but the thing that's similar to that. But long story short, yeah. Bipolar basically means that if I have this wavetable position, here, let me turn this all the way down. If I have this wavetable position here in the center, by having it be bipolar, it can randomly go anywhere above or below this section. But if I had it not bipolar, it means that it could only randomly go above this section. So I hope that makes sense to anyone out there who wasn't sure about what bipolar means when it comes to an LFO. So it means that it'll only go in the direction that you tell it to go. So I could set this to be negative, the random amount. I guess I can't set the random amount to be negative, can I? In Vital, like it's just set to be random, and then I guess you want to positively or negatively adjust it, but it's going to just randomly go above or below. So there's really no way to make it only be positive, which is interesting. So I guess that's one thing about Vital it's like a thing you can't do, or you can do in other synths, but not in Vital. But anyway, back to the task at hand. So you've got your pitch bend in your matrix, you've got the wavetable position all set up on your Drink the Juice, you have randomness, you've made sure that everything has stayed clean, like you're maintaining a clean low end by high passing your mid basses and being conscious of the fact that you don't want this wonderful squarey sine thing to be destroyed or messed with in any way. And then the next step is to start adding effects. So what I will usually do is add some kind of stereo enhancement. And my favorite kind of stereo enhancement is the chorus in Vital. I really love Vital's chorus. It's probably actually my favorite chorus in any synth, just because it sounds so cool when you freeze it. So by default, it's going to be moving around, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it moving around. But I find when you freeze it, it adds a very distinct stability to the stereo. And you can hear now it's like not moving around. Where if it's got movement to it, it doesn't feel as stable. But if it's frozen, it feels like very stable, very like straightforward, less, I guess muddy is really the word that we're avoiding. Like we're avoiding mud, because like mud is something that is always, it's what I dislike. Some people enjoy, right? Like low mid is mud, but I think that it takes away from clarity. So this is a way to avoid mud. And the other big thing we're going to do here, after we've set this to be frozen and turned it on, of course, is we're going to make sure to high pass it by just dragging the cutoff all the way up and then bringing the spread down a little bit. So you can see here how the shape of it, and we want it to basically be similar to the shape we have here, right? So we want to make sure we're high passing all those frequencies. We want to try and avoid stereo information in this very, very low range. And of course, we can go in and adjust the feedback a little bit. I like it with a sort of high feedback, but basically the less feedback, the more transparent it will be. So yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. We can also adjust the mix as well, maybe bring it in a little bit. Yeah, so we didn't need it to be at half. I think we can get away with it being at this like third, kind of 33-ish% or something. So yeah, that's how you can add some stereo information to your basses without it being something that adds mud. You can also get away with doing similar things with the delay, which I've done as well, like having a very fast tempo to delay, and then just doing the same kind of thing. And you can even do it ping pong. You can set it to ping pong mode and do the same thing like that. And so you can see how it's like adding more and more stereo information. So without it, you can feel how it's very, very mono, but with it, and yeah, I forget, did I turn off? I didn't even turn off Sound ID, but I should have probably done that. But hang on, let me go back to Vital here. Yeah, there we go. It's a little bit more real. That's like actually what it sounds like. But yeah, so I'm gonna just do the chorus for now, but I wanted to let you know you can get away with a ping pong delay doing similar things, and it sounds pretty cool as well. So does everyone get the chorus delay section there? Does anyone have any questions on any of that? I'm kind of blowing through this stuff, but I'm also trying to be as in-depth as I can. So nice. I'm glad that there are no questions. That means that I think everyone's getting the gist. So yeah, after we have added our chorus, the next thing that I'll like to do is add distortion. And the cool part about distortion is you know, you can get very explorative and experimental with it. In this specific instance, what I'm mainly wanting to do is create a little bit more of a pumping effect at the attack side of the bass. So, you know, it sounds like there's a bit of it with this little pitch bendy thing we've got going, but there's actually ways we can enhance this. So what I like to do is use a second LFO and do the same thing that we did before and create an envelope, and maybe we'll raise this up to a quarter note. And we're kind of going to make the inverse shape of this. So instead of it going down, we're going to actually make it so that it goes up like this. So we've got, you know, like a zero amount of automation, then it goes up to fully automated, and then stays a line all the way across here. And we can obviously adjust this. For now, I'll just keep it at a quarter note, and we'll just keep it like this. And I guess that's like 1/8 of this section here. But we might come back and change this. But the idea here is we can take this envelope on the LFO2 here and put this onto the drive knob of the soft clip or hard clip. Either one of these really works. The soft clip is a little bit more transparent though, which is why I like it more, but hard clip is also really cool too. But the idea here is when we hit this note, you can hear now how it's like adding this feeling of like, whoa, something is coming at me fast. Like, you know, it's like a lot more aggressively impactful. And we can adjust how fast that's happening. And we can obviously adjust that as well, the drive amount, by just clicking and dragging here. And I don't know if you guys also saw this, but I did adjust the amount of automation by clicking and dragging on this little automation amount here. You can also do the same at the LFO itself. But the idea here is we're trying to make it tastefully dry. Still pretty transparent though. So like with it off. And I would say we could even get away with making this a little bit more parallel by adjusting this mix knob to taste. I'd say right there is pretty cool. So it's adding that feeling of impactfulness, but it's subtle. You know, it's not this like thing that is very obvious. And that's another thing. A lot of the decisions that I make when it comes to making these sounds is lots of subtle things culminating into like one big feeling. So a lot of the times when I'm doing all of these steps, I'm doing them in a way where the reason why I have done them and continue to do them is because they're subtle enough to add variation and change to the sound. But they're also like, together they become this big thing that feels very interesting and complex. But yeah. So does anyone have any questions with that? The envelope LFO on the drive of the soft clip distortion. No, good. Okay, last but not least, we are going to add a compressor. And a lot of the times people will add the OTT, which is like by default. This is technically an OTT. It's a multiband compressor. But in this case scenario, I actually prefer the single band OTT just because I don't think Vital's multiband compressor sounds that great. I mean, yeah, strike me down or whatever if you think that that's not the case, but I'm just not a huge fan of it. So these days I actually just use the single band. And what I'll do is I'll use this to control how aggressive the volumes are of everything. So as you can already tell, without it, it's a lot louder. With it, we get like a little bit of control here, and we can kind of adjust how much control is happening by changing the downwards compression and the upwards compression. So first, let's go ahead and maybe get the top, the downwards compression set to where we want it. Nice. And then we can also come back and adjust the upwards compression to maybe be a little bit more aggressive. And by clicking and dragging here, if you saw me do that, this is going to adjust the ratio of compression. So the lower the ratio, the subtler it's going to be, but the higher the ratio, which is the closer these lines are together, the more aggressive the amount of compression is going to be. And I believe that if you're not brick walling stuff, it's not going to sound as good. So so I like to try and keep my compressors kind of flexing at higher ratios. Okay, cool. So the last step to the Squonk vibe is adding a low pass filter. Now, if I was you, and if I was also only an Ableton user, which I'm not, but I'll be honest, I'm definitely a bigger fan of Ableton, I would go and download my Squonker Rack, because that's basically going to take this next step that we're going to talk about to a whole nother level. But the concept of the Squonk is a low pass filter. And this is big brain knowledge here. So the idea is, after you've created this wonderful sound, you can create a lot of impactful feeling, like a very interesting and dynamic feeling, by filtering out frequencies. And my favorite way to filter out frequencies is to low pass, especially with these types of basses. Because what ends up happening is you are still leaving the sub most of the time, of course, not all the time, most of the time, which is what sounds the most impactful in bass music. It's what's giving, stability to the bass. But you are removing and re-adding the upper harmonics, which creates a lot of dynamic feeling. And I'll just demonstrate that. And of course, we can be a little bit more creative with this. We can add some resonance if we want. We can also change where the filter is located. We can adjust, how much, how high the pole is, or even what type of filter we're using. We can change it to maybe the digital filter. And what that does, by the way, changing these filter types, assuming you're still using a low pass, is it lets you change the drive type on the filter, which can let you add, little bits and pieces of flavor in the form of distortion. So, obviously, we're gonna go ahead and add a macro to that because, and we're gonna call it the squonk knob because that's what it's all about. So now we can obviously mess around with that, and maybe I could take that back a little bit, and maybe we'll make another knob for the drive amount, just so that way we can control like how aggressive the distortion is on that filter. Let me actually just try and get this to fit. We're just gonna do SQ drive, and you can hear the difference between none, no drive, and drive, and that's just adding more frequencies. And maybe we can adjust the pole a little bit. Also, that little bit of clicking is the one thing about Vital that I sometimes dislike. 99% of the time, you're going to have to mess around with this envelope up here. Whoops, not this one, but this one, the first envelope. And that's what's going to allow you to get rid of that click. And sometimes it won't even get rid of it. The only other way that I have been able to get rid of the Vital click is to be very conscious of the levels here and set up a second envelope on these levels, and maybe we'll set it back to the original value here, which I think was, what is it? I think it's 0.75. So 0.75, and I'm just right clicking, enter value, 0.75. And that, and it still clicks sometimes. So yeah, that's the one thing about Vital that I've, that's probably one of the reasons why I don't love it as much as I used to. That one little bit of stuff that's like annoying to have to fix. But in the context of a mix, I'm gonna be dead ass. I rarely notice those clicks, and if you're recording it to audio, you can always manually remove that kind of stuff anyway. So, which I'm gonna show you how to do here in a minute. But anyway, that's how you basically build a squonked bass inside of Vital. There's not a whole lot more we could add. I guess we could add another oscillator here. We could go one step further and route it to filter 2. And maybe we'll add a harmonic series, because that's just such a fun sound that we love. Everybody loves a harmonic series. Disperse the harmonic. Is that what I should do? Let's see, where is it? Phase disperse. What FM2 from 3 octave up with a randomizer on that for all kinds of random randoms? That is a confusing statement, my friend.
I just made like all kinds of random tones with like a weird wavetable in 3. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, I
Going
mean,
into 2,
yeah, you
volume all the
can
way down.
basically,
And then
long
with
story short, you can manipulate these two wavetables together in whatever way.
Where's the harmonic series? Where's that under?
Oh, that is under factory and then basic harmonic series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
Thank you.
crazy.
Yeah. And we can also go one small step further and create like chords within the synth by doing things like transposing the harmonic series, like the classic 19 semitones. But yeah, and that's how you do it. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Vital when it comes to the generation of sounds. But once again, I'm gonna say it. The Squonker, as far as squonking goes, the Ableton rack that I have built, I think transcends what this filter can do. Even though the vibe, the general theme of what is going on, can definitely be established with this one filter. But yeah, having more control over your filtering is very helpful. And of course, you can use like anything you want. But maybe I'll do another workshop on filtering and the process of filtering. But for now, I will just show you the Squonker on a sound like this, and then maybe we will record. So for any of you who do have the Squonker downloaded in Ableton, I highly recommend you follow along. If not, just keep using this squonk knob inside of Vital, and we will record here momentarily. I just wanted to show you guys. And that's just because the Ableton filters sound really clean. That's really the only reason. And of course, I have like my own saturation modes. And the other big thing that is nice to have, and you can obviously do this in any DAW, but to have a limiter at the end of this chain is helpful. I have one built into the Squonker, just so you can kind of control some of the crazy high stuff that can happen. But yeah, you really want to try and limit some of this stuff. And I even have a separate sub limiter, so that way you can limit your sub at like a different volume. All right. So let's go ahead and go to the next step, which is recording these sounds and how to do that. Because that's like the most important part, is the MudPie, creating the MudPie, because then you actually have something you can use in the future. I have never in my entire, actually maybe I have at some point, but I just can't remember it. I don't think I have ever in my entire life used these types of presets in the context of a song as they are. I am almost always recording to audio and then using that audio in the context of the song. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there, because it's not that they can't be used in a fun way in a track, but I feel like you can't get the explorative flow that I think is most fun with the squonked basses unless you're recording it to audio. So yeah, the last step here is doing such a thing, and to do that we're just going to create an audio track, and in your DAW of choice, of course, you can do that. This process really I can't explain on other DAWs very easily. I could do an FL tutorial on this, but in FL you can just slap Edison on the track and that should work just fine. As far as other DAWs, I would recommend looking up a video on how to resample. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to resample in a lot of different DAWs, but in Ableton you do so by creating a track and then clicking on the input up here and then clicking resampling. And what that will do is, let me just grab our Vital here. It will let you record whatever it is that your DAW is playing at the time. So, of course, it's just taking a second to move this. So basically what it does is it lets you very easily record whatever audio is playing. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to enable the Vital track to record, and we are going to also enable the audio track to record by holding Control, and I think it's Command on a Mac. Maybe Real can back me up on this to enable both of these. I think it's Command.
Wait. Command for what?
To enable the multiple tracks to record. Command click, I think, is what you do on a Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then once you've done those things, it is as simple as clicking the little record button up here, clicking play, and then before I actually click play, I'm just going to mention I would recommend to you to stick to one note. There's a bunch of different notes on the keyboard, of course, but as soon as you start playing all these different notes into a MudPie, you are running the risk of not knowing what note is what inside of the sample. Whereas if you're playing a single note, you are guaranteed to know what that note is, especially if you label the MudPie. And that I find is very helpful for arranging the MudPie, because then you know, okay, if this is an F note, which most of my MudPies are, if this is an F note and I want to make it a D sharp, I just have to pitch it down twice, right? Like that's a lot easier to comprehend than going, okay, this MudPie has D sharps, Fs, F sharps, G sharps, all throughout it. I have to now decipher which one is which may not be that hard, especially if you have perfect pitch. But I find that it just takes so much more time than if you just have like individual MudPies that are hitting individual notes. So yeah, most of the time I will just be hitting the F note the whole time, and then I will record really the flows that I record I try and get them to be as weird as I possibly can get them. And that is like super ambiguous, I think. But the idea here is I wouldn't try to make it like rhythmic or like pattern like. It's like the anti-pattern, right? Like you're trying to record something that is truly a wild animal. So like I think the more random and crazy you can get with it, the better. But I find that if you do this process automatically, it doesn't quite feel as organic. And that's just been my own experience, because I've tried doing this process a lot with like random LFOs and things like that, and it just never quite feels as deliberate as when you're doing it with your hands. So yeah. I'm going to hit record here. I'm going to mess around with this squonk knob. If you are not in Ableton and don't have the stock squonker, mess around with your squonk knob inside of Vital. And we are going to record some F notes onto this track here. So yeah, it's as simple as this. And of course we can open up Vital and increase the randomness, maybe change the wavetable position. We can also like reduce the randomness you can also do stuff like change the harmonic series. And yeah, and that's like I think a decent sized MudPie. But yeah, the idea here is now we've recorded that entire experience into a sample. Okay, and that is the goal here. And as soon as you have that you're basically like 99% of the way there. I guess the last step is to label it and save it and then use it for later. So I'm going to just do that here. I'm just deleting that empty space. I'm going to group these together here by Control Alt. I think is it Alt J or is it just Control J? Yeah, a second. Control J. There we go, to consolidate. And then inside of Ableton, what you can do is you can go to your current project down here. Of course, make sure you're not searching for things. And you can open up your samples, processed, consolidate, and then that's where you can find that sample. And you can even left click it and make sure that it's the right sample. Which it is, of course. And then, then you can drag it to wherever you want. I have a little MudPies folder here. So what you can do is hold Control when you drag it, and it will copy the sample. So it won't actually move the sample, but it'll copy it into there. So that way you still have the current sample in your project. Otherwise, it would move the sample, which means like it would disappear out of this project, which can sometimes be bad if you want to keep working with it, stuff like that. So I recommend holding Control. I think it's actually Command on Mac. But yeah, Control on Windows, and then drag it to a place that you may have opened or saved here. And then, yeah, after that, you can just rename it to whatever you want. So you can just right click, rename. I'll just call this MagDoIt F Neuro MudPie. And then I like to even say like what DAW I made it in, and then what synth I made it with. And yeah, that's how you make squonks, lads. That's how you do it. And maybe one day soon we'll do another workshop on how to arrange them. But I think that's all we've got for today. I'm glad you all slid through and learned how to make some cool basses.
Damn. Did anyone record because I like totally missed like the last 30 minutes.
I recorded it. It'll be uploaded on ye old Patreon / YouTube, so it will be there.
All right, bet.
But yeah. So
Oh, thank you. That was sick.
yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm hoping that it levels up your squonky basses if that's what you're going for.
The
Beautiful.
chorus
Thank you.
and the delay, I feel like really made a huge difference. Too.
Yeah. Well, the thing about stereo imaging in basses is you can do whatever you want, like post-process wise, like while it's in the context of a song. But I find that the sound design, like when it's out of context, like we were just doing, you want it to be as like transparent as possible. Like everything you do to the sound, you want it to be as subtle and as barely felt as possible. So when you're adding like stereo information, my thought process is I don't want it to be something that I want to remove later. And it's very rare that and even if I did want to remove it, I want to be able to do that very easily. So like, you could remove that by just high passing the stereo, in whatever project you're working in. And it'll go away immediately versus like a delay that's like really long, for example, that's going to be kind of hard to get rid of in the context of a song. So like every step that I take when it comes to sound designing, I'm usually trying to design stuff that's very context aware, but not in context, if that makes sense. So like it wants to be in the context of a song, but it's not. So it needs to be able to fit like any situation. So you don't want to add too much. But yeah.
It also makes them much more like useful for the reuse.
Oh, absolutely. I will go back to MudPies that I've made like even a year ago and just, rinse them. Because, you'll always have that fun timbre to tap back into. And if the timbre was made in a way that, like you just described, is like reusable, then
something that I also just started doing is like taking that kind of idea, saving it into or having a folder of like sounds, and then a bunch of subfolders in that, and then like you can throw a nice MudPie in one of those folders of like, you can just name one of those folders a specific type of sound you were working on that day, And then sometimes I'll also just throw the whole like layer of like the synth like in Ableton in there too, so I can just drag it out and like go right to the sound design that I was working on real quick to get that sound, or I can have like examples of mud pies from it.
Oh yeah,
But also
that's.
save like
I'm sorry.
the little piece of the project, so I can just drag it right back with the full chain and everything if I want to like get that again real quick.
Absolutely. And yeah, always like save your presets, save like everything.
I'm
you
trying to
know?
like organize it like that. Like I can use this for a mud pie. I have a little example of it with like a beat behind it. So like, oh, that was a nice kind of thing. And then I don't know. That's just something I just started like organizing yesterday. I was
That's
thinking
big brain. That's super big brain. Yeah, always save your stuff. So yeah, that whole vital thing that we just did, I would recommend saving that, and then you can always reopen it later and mess around with it. Yeah, I think that's like
In
super
Ableton
important.
too, you can drag in like if you have phrases. Colin taught me this. I've been doing it a ton. Rather than just like saving a preset or saving an Ableton rack as a patch, you can save the whole MIDI track, and then you can just drag it into your fucking DAW, and it comes with like the automation and the note you were hitting. And it like keeps the rhythms. Shit's nice.
Yeah, I think it's literally as simple as just clicking and dragging it like into your wherever,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy. But yeah. Well, I guess that's it. Does anyone have any questions before we call it? We wrap it up here. Well, cool. Yeah, once again, thanks for tuning in, you guys. Looking forward to seeing more squonked basses in the future.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This is like a topic, like just mud pie topic.
I
in
was
general.
surprised you didn't add a phaser on the low end.
So like phasers are filters technically, right? And a lot of phasers are stereo, but the reason why I avoid filtering the low end is because I want the low end to be pristine. I want it to be untouched, pure. Just because I can always add a phaser in context of a song if I really wanted to, which I honestly still probably wouldn't do, just because it risks removing power from the sub, like the feeling of stability. But if I had a dedicated sub and I wasn't worried about phasering the mid bass at that point, I still would not want to do that in the context of the mud pie. I would do that in the context of the arrangement of the song. So like, I think that makes sense. It's one of those things where it's like, that sounds like something that would be great in the context of a song, but when it comes to creating a sound to be able to use in any situation, I think you run risks, especially when it's something that's time based. Because I assume that the phaser is going to be like moving.
You can freeze it.
I mean, and then at that point, it's kind of like filtering the sub, which filters in general create phase changes. And then on top of that, if it's a stable filter, that means you're going to have different feelings for different notes. So like if you were hitting a note at like 30 hertz or 40 hertz, it's going to feel different than the note that's getting hit at like 60 hertz or 70 hertz because of the way that the filter is and that it's not moving if it's just staying there. And the whole idea of low end is you want it to be stable and very sturdy and very like controlled, because it'll make the sub hit when you want it to hit, because it's just like a totally separate part of the speaker like setup, right? Like you've got your mids, your tweeters, and then your sub, and the sub, it's like its own thing. And more often than not, I have found that the cleaner the sub, the harder it hits. Because like when you have a less clean sub, it feels like it doesn't work the magnets inside of that subwoofer in the way that you would want them to. Whereas like pure sine waves or maybe like very subtle harmonically enriched sine waves tend to just slap really hard.
It's that shit that you just feel in your fucking chest through the fucking room, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that's the type of shit that you literally like. You feel your entire body resonating.
Right.
Like, Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with putting phasers on mid bases. I would just say to avoid lower frequencies at that point. So like anything in your sub region, I would not put the phaser on just because it's going to end up potentially negating that feeling that Snake was just kindly talking about, which is a fun
Frozen
feeling.
It's a good feeling. It's a really good feeling. I
I
promise.
mean, that's what the dedicated sub would be for, though, right?
Right, that's what I'm saying. So in the context of a song, I think it would be great. But I would add that after the fact because a lot of the bases that I make I designed to be used with or without a dedicated sub. So like I like all of my bases I can confidently drag into a track and 99% of the time not even have to add the dedicated sub because they're already like so clean on the low end. But obviously, if you want to go that extra like 5% and make it really, really slap, the dedicated sub is the way to go. But I like to make my sounds to be usable in both situations. So like adding a phaser is something I would definitely do, but only in the context of the arrangement, not in the context of the mud pie for that reason.
All right.
Frozen phaser on the upper low mids goes so stupid. Specifically the Rift phaser is pretty fucking cracked. But frozen and upper low mids.
What? What kind of phaser on
Upper
the
low mids? Upper low mids. It's like the space between the top of your high sock and like the hem of your skirt, like in between there.
But what did you say? What type of phaser?
It's the
one that comes with the Rift distortion. I don't think it's that one. I think because I'm noticing I've tried to recreate it in current and I think it's their phaser filter.
I think you're on drugs. Real, are you high on life again?
Is it in current? Is it in current? Is it in
No, it's in Rift. If it is in current, then it's the filter. But I don't think it is. I'm telling like here, yeah, pull the Rift filter open.
It's this one, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying it's the where is it? There it is.
That boy.
What?
I don't know. I feel like it adds mud, but that's maybe just an opinion. But let me try it. Let me try it with the Rift filter light, I think.
Skibbity beep bop bop.
Because now I'm
And
curious.
boom, boom.
Oh, Magdu, did you test Newfangled?
What?
Did you test Newfangled to see if it true peaks?
No, but we could do that right now. A little bonus action here. Because what is it? Elevate, I think, is the one. No, saturate. That's what it is. Saturate.
Saturate.
Let's see. So ceiling 0 dB.
You gotta slide the clipper shape to hard.
Oh. I just wanted to make sure. I don't think it is. Because look, here, let me see if I can grab a, I'm just going to render this. Just add another audio track. I don't think so. I mean, like, as in, I think it is actually cutting it all the way. Because it's not going over. I think here, I know what I can do to check it. If I add K-clip, does it clip again? Like, does it actually... doesn't look like it. So I think the short answer is it does actually cut.
Okay.
But that is very strange then that you had the issue that you had. Let me see if Pro L does Pro L activate. It does it like 0.1, but that doesn't really count. That's probably from just the
just out of curiosity, since we're going off on tangents, did you already end recording?
No, but I should probably do that. Yeah, thank you all for watching. And yeah. Newfangled Saturate doesn't suck. That's we're gonna end the video. That's we're gonna end the video on. All right.
What?